it was at the point where I'm not gonna really talk about stuff in the reptile world anymore because I feel really disconnected from it. I feel not a part of the reptile community, but I have to talk about this thing that went down with FWC last week in Florida involving the euthanization of over 30 snakes. If you don't know the story, apparently FWC, which is the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, FWC is kind of the regulating body when it comes to permitting animals, exotic and natives in Florida. The ultimate gist of it is that 34 animals were euthanized. And I'm having a hard time justifying how that went down on multiple fronts. Don't get me wrong, we're going to find out about it. FWC officers apparently showed up in an unannounced Florida reptile facility and euthanized 34 pythons and 1 pregnant boa constrictor, which was originally misidentified. And this is where the story gets really screwed up. It's bad enough that you're euthanizing these pythons, but the boa constrictor was specifically pointed out by the facility owner as a legal animal and also a gravid female. She was carrying a very expensive, a very highly sought after litter, apparently, according to the video from what I saw. The owner of the facility set up his cell phone to record the officers going about their duty. He apparently didn't want to be there, understandably, while these animals were being euthanized, right? He set up his phone and it recorded the reactions of the FWC officers as they realized their mistake, and they fucked up bad. They were basically grabbing snakes without too much thought going into it beforehand. They were more concerned about being bitten than identifying the snakes, which to me shows a lot of inexperience, but I digress. Anyway, they went in there and the officers indiscriminately went into a cage, pulled the snake out. They then euthanized, and I use the term euthanize lightly. They basically murdered the snake by using a cattle bolt, which is viewed as an ethical way of euthanizing animals. And what it basically does is it drives a high-powered bolt. So basically you put this bolt right up against an animal's head, and once you push down the plunger, it drives a metal plunger down into the skull of the animal, incapacitating the brain and rendering the animal dead, in theory. We really don't understand how this happens, especially in reptiles where there seems to be some kind of a delayed reaction. But anyway, I digress. They picked up the snake and they drove the bolt through its head. And when the officer went back to the cage to photograph the identification of the animal, he realized his faux pas, and you can see the absolute look of shock on his face when he realized what he had done. It was at this moment that they realized they fucked up. Essentially, moments after that were followed with a panic, and I should say it was a silent panic between fellow officers. It said a million words without them saying one. They knew they fucked up badly, and they were just kind of reeling in the moment and obviously trying to figure out what to say afterwards. And they reluctantly told the owner about what had happened, and obviously the owner was completely out of his mind because he had specifically told them not to touch that animal. And I believe it seemed like it was part of a partnership with someone else, which was alluded to in the video.
The bull is dead. What? The bull. The pregnant bull. No. No! Oh my god, that guy's gonna fucking flip out. What is wrong with you guys?
Yeah.
You did!
We're shaking just like we were. Is there a way to maybe save the babies?
Oh no, dude. This guy's gonna go bananas. Oh my god, why?
It was a mistake.
How? I reminded you 10 times! Fuck! Fuck! Oh my god, no, you don't understand what you guys
can get fixed.
You can't fix it.
It's gonna fix it.
You can't fix it. What just happened?
It can get fixed.
You can't fix it. You just killed something that wasn't illegal, and it had about $100,000 worth of fucking babies.
It was seriously disturbing how quick they were to euthanize these animals without any kind of due process. Listen, I work in the rescue world at this point, and I understand that there are points when you have to make a call, and euthanasia is that call. I get that. And you really exhaust every avenue possible before reaching that point. It was very clear to me that FWC cares nothing about these animals, and they care more about fines and regulations because they're quick to euthanize these animals without making any concerted effort to find homes for them, which could pretty easily have been done if they had put the word out there that these animals needed to be placed out of state to permitted individuals, but that wasn't done. So I guess it's important to note that the owner had these animals legally, and then last year the legislation in Florida changed to make them illegal. Now this in itself means that those animals should have been grandfathered in, which means that they wouldn't be subject to the laws after they changed. They would be subject to the laws while they were kept legally in possession and permitted by the owner. He could essentially keep these animals in a legal fashion if he chooses to. But Mr. Coffee chose not to keep these animals any longer, and instead he chose to rehome them. The problem is he didn't really do it in a timely fashion, and by the time the deadline was up, he still had several animals that were without homes. Now, he tried to do the responsible thing and he notified FWC, but this resulted on him popping up on their radar. Like my dog. Stop. So one important thing to note is that Mr. Coffee chose to transport these animals to another facility in Florida, despite the fact that legislation was already in place stating that it was illegal to keep these animals. Now this is where it becomes a little sketchy, you see, because he had reported the animals were in his possession, but then he went and moved them to another facility. Now this gives FWC the green light to do whatever they want. It's a little unclear if he had notified FWC that he was going to move these animals to another facility, but at this point that's definitely enough of a red flag for them to come and investigate it further. And investigate they did. Soon enough they showed up on the doorstep of Bill McAdam, which is the owner of the facility that the snakes were currently being kept at. Mr. McAdam basically allowed them at this point to come in and complete their investigation, and ultimately they decided that they were going to euthanize these snakes. You know, there's one other important fact that should be considered in this, is the fact that according to FWC's official statement and their automated response to a lot of people, the reason that they came out to visit this facility is because they were investigating the fact that a reticulated python was found loose within the vicinity of this facility. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is true, once again, it just proves the fact that we are our own worst enemy. These powerful constrictors are not easy to contain, and if not properly done, they will escape. And how many times has this scenario played out where the actions of one or two irresponsible people end up affecting an entire community, end up changing legislation as we know it? Understandably, Mr. McAdam didn't want to be present while animals were being euthanized, so he set up his phone to record the activities of the agents, and this is what resulted in that.
So
Do you lift this up?
no. You pull this as a
Oh,
safety,
you hold it.
and then you just smash like you hit down, and eventually it'll bruise.
Boom!
Because
A
it's like a
bolt
shot.
comes out and comes back in.
So it shoots in and then it comes back into it. And
So-
you'll notice.
The snake has the two eyes in front, and you see where the back of the jaws are, right? Where they stick out there. An X right between in there, and that's where you want to put it. Between
Okay.
the eyes and the back of the jaw.
X from the eyes, the back of the jaw.
Yeah. Put it right in the center and bang it.
As you can see, the agents are euthanizing the animals using that bolt gun with reckless abandon. It's happening at a quick pace because they understood the number of animals that they were going to put down. But it's really disturbing to note that animals can be seen writhing in the background despite having been hit and incapacitated by these bolts. This brings into question the ethics of the method of euthanasia that they chose. If these officers knew that they were going to come in and euthanize these animals, they should have done so in a manner utilizing a veterinarian and other techniques which would have been much less traumatic than driving a bolt through the head. So there's a lot of emotion and anger surrounding this incident, understandably so. We are very passionate people, those of us who keep animals in general. But I have to say, the response has been a little disappointing. You guys have been very quick to point fingers at FWC, which you should do. But I think that a major component missing here is the fact that we're not recognizing how much of this we've contributed to. First and foremost, if you think outside the box of what is the norm in the reptile community, keeping 150 plus animals is not normal. It's borderline hoarding, to be honest. I mean, this is a really terrible ordeal for Mr. Coffee, but at the end of the day, if you face the facts, he knew the legislation was changing, he decided to get rid of the animals, and then he failed to secure their safe harbor in a timely fashion. And that's basically what it comes down to. If he had found homes for all of those animals, FWC wouldn't have interfered. And let's face it, it's a little hard to find homes for several dozen, if not hundreds of animals. And this is the problem that we have to face as a reptile community. At what point, when is too much just too much? We have breeders pumping out reticulated pythons left and right by the tens of thousands annually in the United States alone. Where is the outlet for these animals? Is it going to be breeding facilities like this one that are going to become clear targets for government officials? And then we sit there wondering why we are those targets in the first place? If you have ever had the privilege of keeping a reticulated python, you know it's not the average snake. They need a lot of space. They are really intelligent animals. I would put reticulated pythons up there with one of the most intelligent snake species of all time. And this becomes evident when you lock them up in small boxes in order to keep them in mass. These snakes become bored, they resent that they're unable to hunt, and they start to actually damage their faces trying to find an escape. If you're going to keep these animals, you have to keep them responsibly. And it's about time the reptile community faces the fact we don't keep large constrictors responsibly. We haven't for a long time, and we now understand just how wrong this is. And very little efforts are being made to change that. In fact, quite the opposite. We glorify these big-time box breeders by watching their YouTube channels like Prehistoric Pets and others who churn out thousands and thousands of reticulated pythons. And who knows at the end of the day what the mortality rate is on these animals. So listen, I'm all about everyone's rights to keep animals responsibly, but we're not doing it. We're just not doing it right. And that's something that we need to look at. Sometimes you just have to take a look inside before we can project outwards. We are our own worst enemy. This has been the case for a long time. If PETA ever showed up at a reptile show or really took a close look at what happens in this industry, we would be shut out and screwed in a second. And yeah, we make excuses for ourselves, and some of them are valid. I understand completely that reptiles are not the most beloved of animals to the general public, but we're not doing any favors when we sit there and glorify people who put these animals in a negative light. It's just something we all need to consider as a community. You have to clean yourself up before someone else takes the initiative to do it for you. I mean, look, let's face it, in the end, we might not agree with the laws. The laws are very biased against exotic animal keeping. But that's our own doing in a lot of senses. End of the day, whether you like the laws or not, you still have to follow them. And if you choose not to follow them, then you're opening yourself up to the consequences. I mean, by all means, this was definitely a major overreach by FWC, and shame on them for responding the way they have. They need to really evaluate the way that they handle these situations. They need to bring in third parties to decide what animals need to be euthanized, and they also need to make a better effort to work with other professionals, zoological professionals, even shelters, just to be able to find homes and safe haven for these animals instead of facing euthanasia so quick-handedly. USARK is doing its best to fight this. I implore you, if this is important to you, to support them. It's probably your best bet legislatively wise. But at the same time, when USARK is turning a blind eye to the industry, to the fact that we are running reptilian puppy mills, it's really not going to put a lot in that foundation. So just think about it. Think about ultimately being a more responsible pet owner, and just pray for yourself, because laws are not getting any better. you're quickly losing your ability to keep these animals legally. At what point are we going to start doing this in a more intelligent fashion before becoming outlaws? You know, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to point fingers at anyone with regards to this whole situation. I think there was failures on both sides, to be honest. But just the worst part of it, and the reason I was compelled to even speak about this, is the fact that 34 innocent lives were lost. Please, reptile people, we have to do better. We have to. This is going to be the end result every single time, I promise you. I see it. I see it at work. I see it professionally. I see it on the internet. I hear from my friends who are lifelong, you know, reptile enthusiasts and what they're going through. These are really tough times, and you have to play the game of chess. It's not checkers anymore. It's chess. Play the long game.